The U.S. loses track of nearly 1,500 migrant children. The White House says it's not responsible. But could this be a major case of neglect? I'm Imran Garta, and today's newsmakers are the migrant children missing in America. Every year, thousands of children show up at the U.S. border with Mexico alone. Many of these minors are running away from violence in Honduras, El Salvador or Guatemala, and they've got good reasons to leave: drug cartels, domestic abuse and violent gangs. Nevertheless, the White House maintains it's not responsible for what it calls illegal immigrants, even if they're as young as 10. So when a government department admitted to the Senate last month that it had lost track of 1,475 migrant children, officials used the defense that it's not our responsibility. But is that true? In 2016, the Department of Homeland Security said the Obama administration had a responsibility to track these children so they wouldn't be abused or end up in the hands of human traffickers. So, if the problem persists, why aren't measures being taken to protect some of the most vulnerable people in the Americas?
At the end of a long journey from Central America, one more hurdle. Straddling the U.S.-Mexico border, the future they've risked life and limb for is in sight. But crossing into the U.S. is becoming even more difficult and is carrying even greater risk.
I have put in place a zero-tolerance policy for illegal entry on our southwest border. If you cross the border unlawfully, then we will prosecute you. If you are smuggling a child, then we will prosecute you. And that child may be separated from you as required by law.
Hundreds of immigrant children have been separated from their parents at the border since October. The rate of crossing subsided last year, but has soared in recent months. Still, U.S. President Donald Trump says his deterrence-based approach is working.
We're down over 40% border crossings. We've been able to do what I think nobody else has been able to do. We're down over 40%.
Now, the Trump administration has come under fire by human rights organizations after it was reported that the U.S. government separated nearly 1,500 immigrant children from their parents and then lost track of them. It's not clear if they're in fact missing, and many showed up at the border without their parents. Trump has blamed Democrats for the separations, saying it's the result of promoting an open border policy. But his critics say it's Trump's zero-tolerance policy that's tearing families apart. The reality is that thousands of immigrant children go missing in the U.S. each year. And while the U.S. government has been loath to take responsibility, many are now asking, if their parents are arrested at the border, then who's left to protect them? Randolph Nogle, The Newsmakers.
Let's go to our panel now. I'm joined from Washington, D.C. by David Insera. He's a policy analyst with the Heritage Foundation, specializing in homeland security issues and immigration policy. And in Tampa, Florida, we have Ahmed Badir. He's the president of United Voices for America, an organization that tries to increase the participation of minorities in politics. Gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us. David, let me begin with you. 1,475 children. The authorities lost track of them. Is that a scandal?
You know, I think that this is an unfortunate reality of the system that we have right now. There are these loopholes that the Trump administration is talking about. This is one of those loopholes. The government is required right now to release these children into the United States. These are unaccompanied children. They did not have their parents when they arrived at the border. And then they have to put them in the hands of sponsors. And I think that system is a system that can be abused, but I also think it's a system that can lead to more illegal immigration. And that's why the Trump administration wants to end this program. They want to end this loophole.
Okay, well, it is very hard to identify a lot of the facts amid the social media firestorm, especially over the past few days. There are two separate issues here that do overlap a little bit. So you have these almost 1,500 kids who are kind of lost to the system, or the system can't follow up on them. And then you have President Trump's administration vowing to separate migrant parents from their children if they cross the US border illegally, and they have. So we're going to get to the separation in a moment. Let me stick to the 1,500 for the moment and go to Ahmed Badir. Ahmed, 1,475 kids. We're hearing from David that this is a systemic problem and it's a legacy issue. It's been passed on from the Obama administration. Is that how you see it?
Well, it's definitely a failure. I mean, it's unfortunate that in the United States of America that we still don't have a real comprehensive immigration policy that, in a way, encourages this kind of behavior. When you have an anti-immigration administration that campaigned against immigrants, that called some of these immigrants animals, that in the past called them rapists and thugs, continues to use this issue of immigration and migrants as a political football. They know that it works for their base, and they're using it to score political points. It's not necessarily prioritizing these children, and they're trying to blame the Democrats for it. But the reality is that they're continuing to use this immigration issue and risking the lives of children to score political points and win elections in November.
David, is that what this administration is doing?
No, I would disagree with that. The reality is that they're required by U.S. law to release these children. Do I think that is a really unfortunate situation? I do. I don't think that releasing these children into the United States, into the hands of sponsors, I don't think it's entirely safe. I think it can be abused, and these children could end up in the wrong hands. I think that's horrible. And I also think from the Trump administration's perspective, if you're going to be releasing illegal immigrants into the United States, and then often you're reuniting them with other illegal immigrant family members in the United States, that it's no surprise that sometimes these people go missing, that sometimes these people do not want to be found because they are fleeing from the authorities. So this is, in many ways, this is a broken system, and the Trump administration wants to fix it.
Ahmed?
It's a broken system that they don't want to fix because it continues to pay over and over and over. As long as there's an immigration problem, then they can continue to use it and point the finger at Democrats and say, that's why you have to put us in office, so we can keep you safe from these animals that are coming from south of the border. And this is the problem. There's nothing illegal about children. These are children. There's nothing legal about them. The fact that they end up being at the border for some reason, not to any fault of their own, it doesn't make them illegal. There is a mandate that, the mandate is that is not to lose track of them or to lose the children. The mandate says basically that the government cannot put children in prisons. Surely they could find a better way. The priority for the Trump administration continues to be to build the wall. And in a way, they're using this issue as political blackmail, saying to the Democrats and blaming the Democrats publicly and simply saying, if you want to fix all of this, then fund Trump's wall and all of this can go away. And they use it for the DACA issue, again, for children that came into the country, as minors and being allowed to stay here. And they continue to use immigration, especially the lives of children, as political collateral and blackmail to force the Democrats to fund building this fantasy wall that supposedly the Mexicans are going to pay for it. And Trump, again, said this last night, and the president of Mexico replying, no, it's never going to happen.
Right. David, to add to that, and I know you're shaking your head in disagreement, let me read out President Trump's tweet regarding this issue. He said, put pressure on the Democrats to end the horrible law that separates children from their parents. There's a spelling mistake there. Their parents, once they cross the border into the U.S. catch and release, lottery and chain must also go with it, and we must continue building the wall. Democrats are protecting MS-13 thugs. Now, David, that is false, right? I mean, his policy is zero tolerance, as explained by the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions. If you come with your kids, we'll separate you. That's not policy that came from the Obama administration. So he's mixing some of these issues. He's talking about MS-13 and he's talking about building a wall. Doesn't that make Ahmed's point for him, that Trump is taking this issue, extrapolating out of it what he wants to, and using it for political capital, even if it's false?
Well, I would say that there's multiple different loopholes, and I would agree that I think there is some confusion here about which ones we're talking about. But in this next one that you've talked about, this tweet that you've mentioned, this is the fact that when we have there's another requirement that we have to release children from jails after we can't hold them for more than 20 days. And the problem is that if you have families coming over, families that are all together with their children, what do you do when you have to release the child after 20 days, but you don't want to release the families? Because if you release the entire family, we know that 40% of people who we release will not show up at their immigration court hearing. And so that's an unacceptably high amount of people to lose track of, and we need to reject that, and we need to make sure that we have a system in place that is better serving both our legal immigrants. It's better process for the people who are coming here, but it's also better for the immigration system as a whole. It's better for making sure that we have our laws that are faithfully enforced.
Ahmed, all David wants is for there to be law and order, no more, no less. Do you accept that from the man?
Sure, law and order that prioritizes family and takes care of children, and recognize that America is a land of immigrants, and that immigrants make America better, and that there's room for a lot of people. We should have a comprehensive immigration policy that prioritizes families and not an anti-immigration policy that's rooted in some sort of nationalism that plays up to this, to the right and to the base of Trump. And I think, unfortunately, because of the way our political system is, the Trump administration continues to feed into that rhetoric, which, again, will keep our immigration system broken in hopes of somehow building this fantasy wall that will never be built.
When you hear, David, that 8 out of those kids that they were talking about at the Senate Homeland Security Subcommittee, 8 of them had been trafficked and were forced to work on an egg farm, what does that tell you?
Yeah, it tells me that the system is broken, and that we need to end the loopholes that are in place that allow it to happen. I think there's a better way here to handle these families and these children who are picked up at the border. I think if we're going to have people claiming asylum, as is often the case with the people we're talking about here, I think we should have them apply for asylum at our U.S. embassies in Mexico before they arrive here. They don't have to go as far, right? They don't have to make it to the U.S. border. They can have their cases adjudicated in Mexico before they get to the United States. And then if they are rejected, then we don't have to have this whole problem of, well, did we lose them, or what's going on with them? I think that's a better system for both the immigrants, and it's also better for making sure that we have proper, rule of law in how we carry out our immigration system.
Think about this for a second, right? Especially if you're a kid, if you're fleeing a drug cartel, you're from Honduras and you're fleeing a drug cartel and you're 15 years old, are you genuinely going to take your chances going to the U.S. Embassy in maybe Mexico City? Is that a possibility?
It's certainly safer. They don't have to go as far. Right now, they're taking trains that are going incredibly fast. They're being trafficked by smugglers who are often working for the drug cartels. And so, why would we put them in those people's hands when we could say, why don't you have your case adjudicated at the border or even before you get to the border? That way, we aren't losing you in the United States. I think that is the worst case scenario for everyone involved.
Ahmed?
Probably the worst case scenario for some of these children is to remain where they are, where they can end up being child soldiers and risking their own lives. If they just have to show up at the local embassy, there's already a process for that. It's called the immigration process. You go apply for a visa. Asylum everywhere works that, once you get somewhere, once you enter the country, then you can apply for asylum because now you're in some sort of safe area. So there has to be a responsible way. We're not talking about millions of children here. We're talking about a few thousands, and I think they can be taken care of in a responsible way, and stop using this on both the right and the left as some sort of political football to score electoral points. And this is the problem with this whole debate.
Right.
I don't think on either side that they're really interested in resolving it.
Yeah, this is interesting because you say both the left and the right. Do you feel that there's been this moment on the left where they realized, oh my word, this has been going on under Obama as well, and we didn't care about it until a guy we hated came into office? Because everything that's coming out now from the ACLU, for example, with all the statistics from 2008, or rather 2009 and 2014, all under the Obama administration, horrible news for migrants, for separation of families, for minors and so forth. What, was the left just completely naive? Did they think that everything was perfect under Obama?
Well, they weren't as critical, but to his credit, President Obama and the Democrats tried several times to do immigration reform, but the party of no. The Republicans said no to everything, especially after they took over the House and the Senate, and they would not allow anything dealing with immigration to move forward. Just about everything that Obama was trying to suggest was blocked, including immigration reform. But the Obama administration did promise to do immigration reform, but they didn't do it early on. They prioritized Obamacare, and that's now in danger. Basically, Obama's legacy in general is in danger of being undone piece by piece, and it seems like this president and administration and the Republicans, that's their ultimate goal, is everything that Obama has done to try to undo right now, and that's what they're doing. But to be fair, the immigration system has been broken for quite some time, under both parties, and they only remember the immigrants once it's time for elections. And right now we're in election season, and both sides want to get that immigrant vote, especially the Hispanic vote, and they don't want to seem to appear to be against the Hispanic community per se, and that's why they're playing this blame game. But the reality is, it's the Trump administration that's been running on the anti-immigration message with this zero tolerance and threatening to separate families, and separating families in reality. Families are being deported, the parents and the children are left behind, and threatening that parents that show up with children at the border, they'll be separated. And that's what's happening. It's already been going on.
David, the Obama administration and the Democrats in general had better intentions when it comes to immigration, but they were scuppered by a Republican-led Congress. What do you think of that?
You know, I think that it comes down to what we mean when we say immigration reform. This is a term which is used a lot, but what does it actually mean? I think when we talk about immigration reform, there's different things that we could be talking about. I'm actually very pro-immigration reform, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm pro-amnesty. And I think that's where the dividing line is. I would love to have a conversation about our legal immigration system. Can we make it a system that is more merit-based? Can we talk about how we can have better enforcement of our laws? Can we have better border security? But can we do all those other pieces and not do the amnesty? The amnesty is the thing which is we said that the Obama administration tried multiple times to do immigration reform. Well, they wanted amnesty. They wouldn't even try anything without it. So I would say, why don't we work on those things like legal immigration, which I think there's a lot of room to work on. Why don't we work on that issue? Why don't we serve the legal immigrants who want to come to the United States first? And I think we can have a genuine conversation about that, and we don't have to be anti-immigrant or whatnot. We can be pro-immigration and have a conversation about what the best system looks like. And I think that's what a lot of conservatives want to talk about.
Although, David, when you hear the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, say clearly, if you don't want your child separated, then don't bring them across the border illegally, doesn't sound very humane, does it?
Well, like I said, this is a situation where they're trying to deter more illegal immigration. If the policy of the United States government is, so long as you come across the border with a child, we'll let you go, well, then that's the way that most people are going to come across the border, is with children, not even their children necessarily. And that's, I think, incredibly dangerous. I don't want to incentivize more people to come across the border with children in tow, because that's more dangerous for the child, and I think it's just in general more dangerous for the family, because these people are not just coming across the border, they're coming across the border, they've usually been smuggled or allowed to come to the border because they were allowed to do so in the hands of drug smugglers or these other organizations that are operating in these areas.
Okay, so you're saying it's not great, but it's a deterrent. But if we say, well, it's happened to 700 kids already since October, so it's clearly not working as a deterrent. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, that's why I think there's a better path forward. I think rather than releasing everyone into the United States or breaking up the families, I would say, why don't we have a system where we do this, like I said, can we more quickly handle these cases at the border? Can we more quickly handle these cases even before they get to the border, at the embassy, for example, or the consulate? I think those are better solutions that are better for the immigrants involved, and it's better for the fidelity of the U.S. immigration system.
Okay, gentlemen, lots of moving parts to this, a lot of confusion, especially on social media. I'm glad we could unpack some of it. David Insera and Ahmed Badir, I thank you both for joining us here on The Newsmakers. Still to come on The Newsmakers, Kenya cracks down on corruption as 50 suspects go to court. Is the president fulfilling a promise, or is it too little too late to make a difference? And a flotilla tries to bust the blockade on Gaza from the inside. But did it help further the Palestinian cause? We asked one of the organizers. Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta was re-elected on the promise of cleaning up corruption, but not a single high-level official has been prosecuted since he took office. Then, this past week, the media storm hit. Kenyan newspapers issued one front-page story after another, uncovering fake government invoices that are costing taxpayers millions of dollars. It's led to the detention of dozens of top government officials and business executives. So, is Kenyatta cleaning up the government's act, or is he trying to save face? Haider Abbasi reports.
It was a flagship project launched by Kenya to get more young people into work. But the National Youth Service has turned into a national embarrassment. The NYS is at the center of a corruption scandal involving the alleged theft of nearly $80 million of public money. 40 government officials have been arrested, including the director of the youth organization, General Richard Dubai. 14 others from Kenya's private sector have also been detained. The charges include abuse of office, stealing public funds, and forgery.
In the meantime, several bank accounts that the funds were channeled through have been frozen. My office is working with the DCI and the Assets Recovery Agency in that regard. As the investigations continue, more suspects are likely to be charged.
President Uhuru Kenyatta quickly condemned the accused. He said, "We are not going to tolerate unethical people. People with responsibility must be ready to serve and not to be served." Kenyatta promised to eradicate graft when he first came to power, but there have been no high-profile convictions for corruption during his 5 years in office. Public funds were allegedly stolen by the National Youth Service through the use of fake invoices. The NYS is accused of paying $10 million for beef in a single year. That equates to each recruit having to eat 66 kilograms of beef every day. But cases of corruption in Kenya aren't rare. Just in the last few days, fraudulent payments of $30 million have been uncovered at the National Cereals and Produce Board, and multi-million-dollar contracts have been found to have been given to friends and families of staff working at the electricity provider Kenya Power. A report in March by Kenya's Auditor General showed nearly $400 million of public funds couldn't be accounted for. So with corruption so widespread in Kenya, is President Kenyatta doing enough? Haider Abbasi, The Newsmakers.
Well, to debate this, let's go to our panel in Nairobi. Joining me now is Kimani Ichung'wah. He is a member of parliament from the ruling Jubilee Party. And we're also joined by Edwin Sifuna. He's the Secretary General of the opposition Orange Democratic Movement. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us here on the Newsmakers. So, more than 50 top officials detained, 54 suspects, about $100 million stolen at government agencies. As an MP, is this embarrassing?
I think it's rather embarrassing, and there's no excuse for such an enormous amount of money to have been lost of public funds. But again, the question is on the amount. The amount, I think, is only fair to say that the amount is yet to be ascertained. We are yet to see from the court charges the total aggregate of money is lost. But the question, the point is that there is money lost, irrespective of the amount. It is inexcusable.
So, Edwin, when you heard the news and you saw that all these arrests were made, did you feel that, okay, finally, credit where it's due, this government is taking corruption seriously?
Not really, because what hit us was a sense of deja vu. As you're aware, we have been here before. In the first term of President Kenyatta, we had a similar incident at the National Youth Service, the same organization that is under the spotlight again. And just about a similar number of people were arrested and taken for prosecutions. But you will note that just about each and every one of those who were arrested and taken to courts were actually acquitted in the first NYS saga. So we are hearing a lot of positive vibes or noises from the new Director of Public Prosecutions, but we have to look at it with cautious optimism in light of what happened with the last batch of NYS suspects that were taken to court.
Okay, so looking at the track record, Kimani, we've seen this movie before. These guys will get let off.
I think I have to disagree with my friend Sifuna on one point, that there is anything deja vu about this latest move. One, we must appreciate that this move was not, unlike the first case where it was other people from outside calling on government to come in and investigate. It is government that initiated this investigation through the DCI. We have a new DCI. As Sifuna appreciates, we have a new Director of Public Prosecutions. And they have, within a record period of less than probably 2 months, been able to carry out investigations. And this time round, not just taken a handful of people. They have taken people from the lower cadres of staff to the highest level of a principal secretary and the former Director General of NYS, of the National Youth Service. Therefore, the marked difference between the first investigation and this one is that the first one was actually instigated by demands by probably even members of opposition and civil society. This time round, it was initiated within government itself. DCI has been able, unlike in the past where people had to be pushed to conclude investigations and charge people in court amid a lot of political pushing and shoveling. This time round, even without any political interference and pushing, the DCI has been, within a record period, been able to take people to court. And a record number of people, 50 people. Last time, I think we saw a handful less than 10 people being taken to court. We've seen many of them being discharged by the courts on the argument that there was no evidence before the courts. My prayer today, and the prayer of every other Kenyan, is that there will be adequate evidence to be able to actually take action against these people who are in court today. But I am very confident the new DPP, the new DCI have been able to do this within a very short time. And is a positive thing for the country, is a step in the right direction. The last time, again, we, in our characteristic Kenyan way, we cry for blood of big shots. We cried for the blood of the cabinet secretary, the principal secretary, and all the big shots. We forgot the very little people, the lower cadres of staff, who actually are the people who move transactions in the system, the people who move vouchers around. This time, we have seen not just this lower cadre of people who are actually the initiators of these transactions, the one who actually process this transaction through the system. Right. We have even seen business people, private business people who are involved in this scandal,
these are all
being
interesting
arrested
points.
and taken to court.
so
Something that never happened in the past.
Let's separate out some of it. Let me address the first issue there, Edwin. This new Director of Criminal Investigations, George Kinoti, and there's also the Director of Public Prosecutions. If you look at what they have done, they've been courageous, and as Kimani says, it has come from the inside. This is self-generated from within government. Doesn't that show you a system with some solid checks and balances?
For me, and I will take this point as a lawyer, the measure of whether a criminal justice system is working, whether the DCI who is responsible for the investigations and to present the proper and full evidence to the DPP, and whether the DPP has the capacity to prosecute these people. The success of those two institutions can only be measured by the number of convictions that we see out of the cases that they present to the courts. What the habit has been in this country is that people are hauled to court just to satiate the public anger and to create this impression that something is being done. There's a lot of people who appear to be busy, but no actual work is being done. We have taken the, as I said, position that we will be cautiously optimistic, that we will not judge the success or otherwise of the fight against corruption as exhibited by these two new officers. At this particular stage, when, all corruption trials in this country end at arraignment, that is where even the media interest actually wins. We want the media to actually follow up these prosecutions, and during the presentation of the evidence, we've had the DPP claim that he has very solid evidence this time round. We want the media to be there for us to cast a light on the kind of work that the Directorate of Criminal Investigations and the DPP have done. For me, and the reason that I said it was deja vu, Mr. Kimani Ichung'wah, the MP, knows that even the last time, the PS who was responsible for devolution at that particular time, PS Mangiti, was one of those charged and he was let off. So there was another incident where the president showed up in the House during the last parliament with a list of 60 people and claimed that this was now he's taking the fight to the corrupt. But out of that list, we would ask Kimani today, how many people that were on the president's list that he submitted in the House? What percentage of people on that list were convicted? Right. So for us, we are hoping, because as I said, we are hearing all the positive noises, the right noises from the new DPP, But the measure of success is not the number of people that you hold to court, but the number of convictions that you're able to secure.
So, Kimani, to the point that people are being hauled to court to satiate public anger, we've seen an explosion of media coverage in Kenya. That's one of the reasons it was also flagged up on our radar, because of the way the Kenyan media had covered this story. To that point, is it plausible that President Kenyatta knew just how corrupt these people were at the very top, but didn't do anything until there was public outrage and this explosion of media coverage, and he felt he needed to do something, and also the Director of Public Prosecutions and others felt they needed to do something in response to the anger?
I think, to be honest, President Kenyatta was not acting out of the public's anger. President Kenyatta did direct the DCI to move into NYS and carry out investigations and ensure people are charged. And I think from what we have heard is that this came from an intelligence report which we are not privy to. Those intelligence reports are briefs that are taken to the president, only the president, and the president acted out of those intelligence reports. He did not do that with the media in the know. The media only got to know about these investigations when investigations were midstream. And therefore, the question that the media has been an active participant in letting the world and the public know what is going on, but they're only letting the public know what government was actually doing. And therefore, it has nothing to do with assuaging public anger. It has everything to do with the president's commitment, as he said that this time it will be business as unusual. And business being unusual, the president did move as he named his new government after the elections, the October elections last year. He did move to appoint a new director of the Criminal Investigations Department. He appointed a new DPP, or rather he accepted the resignation of the former DPP and initiated the process to appoint a new DPP. And we are seeing the fruits of all those efforts. Therefore, in terms of political will, I can tell you without flinching my eyes that the president is more than determined, and indeed the entire government is more than determined to fight the corruption and ensure that those who misappropriate public resources are taken to court. And the next bit, of course, and I completely agree with my friend Sifuna, that those who were taken to court last time, I do not know, I'm not a lawyer like Sifuna, whether it was principally due to lack of evidence or issues that happened that we cannot know within the judicial system. And therefore, I can only pray and hope that the judicial system, and again, I've also seen something very positive this time from the judiciary. Before, people would move to court and get injunctive orders not to be charged on corruption charges. Right. This time, 2 of those business people moved to court, and the judiciary stood firm and allowed the prosecution to bring their case to court. And therefore, I can only pray and hope that we can have that renewed energy and vigor to fight corruption, even from the bench in the judiciary.
Edwin, do you share those prayers and that hope that there will be successful prosecutions and fair trials?
Again, I have said and I will repeat that we will have to wait and see the quality of the evidence that is presented before the courts, because as a lawyer, again, I will tell you that a judge will never improve the quality of your case. If you put trash in, you will get trash out. Last time, and I want to confirm to Mr. Ichung'wah, that the reason that the courts gave for the acquittals that we saw in the first NYS saga was insufficiency of evidence, and that in fact the witnesses that were called by the prosecution were there to actually aid the case of the defense, that they were coming to confirm that everything was done by the book. The reason that we are suspicious or remain cautiously optimistic, as I said, is because we've been here before, and this president, this same president, Mr. Ichung'wah, has conveniently avoided talking about the names that were presented before Parliament by President Uhuru Kenyatta in his last term to, essentially indicate this newfound drive against corruption. And how many times can you begin a journey against corruption? So that is why some of us are skeptical.
Okay, so let's take that question and pose it. Okay, let's take that question and pose it to Kimani. How many times can you begin a new, fresh drive against corruption?
I think, to be honest, and Sifuna, being honest, he will tell the world that what the president did in the last parliament, he tabled names of people who were under investigations by the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, and said he was directing that all those people do step aside from public office pending the conclusion of investigations. For those whose investigations were concluded and their files were forwarded to the Director of Public Prosecutions, then the former DPP, they were able to be taken to court. There are those who have been acquitted by the courts on the basis of insufficient evidence. There are those whose cases are still ongoing. I can cite the case example of Mr. Michael Kamau, the former Cabinet Secretary for Transport, who even the current DPP has reintroduced the charges that were dropped in court. And therefore, the fact that there are things that have happened in the past and people charged and being discharged in the courts, that does not in any way foreclose any further investigations and recharging them in court. And that is a case example. Otherwise, I can only state and restate that the president has said it is business as unusual. Right. We have seen from evidence in this case. I will agree with Sifuna. We have to wait and see what happens in the courts, because between me and Sifuna and everybody else in the world, we do not know what evidence the DCI got, what evidence DPP has. We will wait for the prosecution to prove their cases in court, and hopefully that if there are people who are guilty, the only thing I have to be cautious about also is a habit to always have a lynch mob psychology, right, where we rush to lynch people in the court of public opinion. Let us wait for the prosecutions to go on, and those who are guilty, I do hope the judiciary will also act accordingly.
Kimani, let me ask you a personal question. Transparency International in 2017, yes, they listed Kenya 143rd out of 180 countries. They spoke of deep corruption within the political system and their economic system. When we're looking at the suspects now, 54, not only do you have government officials, but you have big businessmen. You're somebody who's been in the system for a long time. You're an MP, you're a member of the ruling party. Tell us, honestly, how tempting or how easy is it to be corrupt as a politician in Kenya? Has anybody dangled anything in front of you?
Let me say, it is very easy to be corrupt in this country, and anywhere in the world, it is very easy to be corrupt. It depends on your integrity and your professional ethics and how you value yourself as an individual. If you don't value yourself as an individual, if you have no professional ethics, no integrity, it is very easy to be corrupt because people are always dangling things in front of you. You have got to resist all these things. You have got, at the end of the day, to remember that you're in public service to serve the public and not to for self-aggrandizement. And if you're there for self-aggrandizement, then that is where you find a lot of people being tempted to get into corrupt activities. But if you stick to ethical and issues of integrity, then it is not easy. I will tell you, as a member of parliament, I served in very influential committees of the National Assembly. People do lobby. Even now in my current position, I have seen people dangling things before my eyes. But I have got to stand firm and act in the best interest of the country.
Edwin, I'm going to give you the final word in this discussion. It's been fascinating, but we're running out of time. Go ahead, Edwin.
Thank you very much. I mean, there is a very direct nexus between political power in this country and corruption. Those two vices, it's like political power exists to support the corrupt system in this country, and corruption is what sustains the political system in this country. When you hear a senior leader in government telling you that his budget for the 2022 election is 200 billion Kenya shillings, essentially $2 billion US, to be spent on a campaign. Yet we know how much this public official earns. We know all his businesses and how much money he makes. That tells you that as a country, we are a long, long way from solving this issue of corruption, especially because it underwrites political success in this country. So if we are going to be honest that we are going to fight this vice, President Kenyatta must begin with the people in the office of the president itself. That is where corruption in this country is actually hosted.
Okay, gentlemen, it's been a pleasure talking to both of you. Kimani Ichung'wah and Edwin Sifuna.
Thank you.
All mine, thank you.
Okay, hope to have you on the Newsmakers again.
Our sitting aims to send out a signal that we will continue our protest, like these protests along the borders. All Palestinians from different factions will stage protests until they get basic rights and Israel ends their occupations and blockade.
It was the first time a flotilla set sail from Gaza, trying to break Israel's blockade from the inside. But they didn't get very far before the Israeli Navy intercepted them firing warning shots at one boat. Activists, students, and wounded protesters in need of medical treatment were all on board the vessels, setting their sights on Cyprus. But no one really expected the boats would get that far. Instead, organizers say they intended to protest a siege that's imposed a stranglehold on millions of Palestinians, prevented from leaving the Strip. Well, to tell us more about the protest, I'm joined from Gaza by human rights activist Ramadan Al-Hayek. Ramadan, good to have you on the Newsmakers. We're used to those trying to break the blockade from the outside in. This group of people, and I understand you're one of the organizers, you're trying to do it from the inside out. Tell me the thinking behind it.
Well, first of all, the idea was originated from the severe pain and suffering of the Palestinian people here in Gaza. If we are talking about a siege that has been imposed by the Israeli side, we are talking about 12 years ago. Until now, we are talking about more than 80% of unemployment rate, which is one of the highest rates in the world, and more than 70% of in food security, and more than 150,000 Palestinian students who have been graduated without any job or work nowadays. We are talking about more than 15% of the deaths of Palestinians here in Gaza Strip, especially, are due to cancer, due to the denial of the Israeli side to give them some kind of a treatment or cure. Yeah. So yesterday was the 8th anniversary of attacking Mavi Marmara, which was attacked by the Israeli Navy forces. So what we can say that the Israeli aggressions against the Palestinian people show no sign of ending.
Talking about the aggressions, a lot of people were killed. In one day, 60 people were killed at the border, or some even contest if it's the border with Israel. During the Great March of Return, thousands of people were wounded. Since March, people have been shot by live fire as they've been walking towards the border. Thankfully, even though this flotilla was intercepted, nobody was hurt. Is it a better way of protesting rather than to walk towards the border and know for sure that the Israelis will shoot and maim you and might even kill you?
Well, first of all, the Palestinian people here in Gaza Strip are trying to resist the occupation in a peaceful way by conducting peaceful events, such as yesterday, for example, when they launched and sailed a boat which is called the Freedom Boat towards Cyprus. On the 14th nautical miles, they were surrounded by 4 Israeli Navy forces and then dragged them to Ashdod seaport. So the Palestinian people, wherever they want to go, east or west, to protest, they want to convey their message to the world that we want to live as the other people in this free world, and we want our basic human rights as according to the international conventions which protect and support these rights. For example, Article number 13 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights stated that a citizen has his or her own right to leave a country, and his or her own right also to leave, to return back to the same country or other country.
I want to ask you what you think of a Trump advisor, Jason Greenblatt, and what he said on Twitter in response to what the Israeli Navy did. He said, and I'm going to quote him, "We commend the Israeli military for handling the so-called reverse flotilla with professionalism and compassion. They successfully de-escalated a dangerous situation. If Hamas cared for the welfare of its people as much as Israel does, that would be progress." So I wonder what you think of this, because part of the thinking for the flotilla was to open the eyes of the international community, as you say, to the suffering in Gaza and the siege. But this is the response we're seeing from somebody who has the ear of Donald Trump. How do you feel about that?
Well, no one can deny that Israel is an occupation power and has and conducted a lot of aggressions against the Palestinian people. And according to international conventions, there are a lot of conventions and dealings have been made in the UN, for example, that supported the Palestinian cause. when the Palestinians are going to resist the occupation power, they are resisting them in a peaceful way, according to their main rights, which is about, if we are talking about their land and by other rights. So the main important thing here is that the Palestinian people here are trying to do their best to face the challenges and obstacles that have been imposed by the Israeli side without any reason.
Right, and major obstacles. And as you mentioned, the Great March of Return, tens of thousands of people protesting peacefully on land, by land. And we saw now with the reverse flotilla, yes, nobody was armed, nobody had weapons, trying to get to Cyprus and bust the blockade peacefully via the sea, right? Both parts of Gaza blockaded by the Israelis. While all of that is happening, Hamas and Islamic Jihad are firing rockets and mortars into Israel. Does that make things more difficult for you?
Well, actually, let us just go back a little bit in 2014, the last war on Gaza Strip, which resulted more than 2,300 Palestinian people have been killed. Yes, if we are, until now, there is some kind of a truce between the Palestinian factions and Israel. And unfortunately, Israel didn't respect these truce. So, and the Hamas and Jihad, in my opinion of view, they are just some kind of reactions toward Israel because of its aggressions and violations, especially for human rights and Palestinians in Gaza Strip. So the Palestinians just want from the international community to make some kind of a pressure on the Israeli side to deal with the Palestinians as humans, as human beings. If we are talking about the life and the consequences of siege in Gaza Strip, there is a severe shortages of electricity and especially severe shortages of medicines, which cause
Right, certainly. And but again, I just want to ask you, because the Great March, you have thousands of people going peacefully, and with the Flotilla, they're going peacefully. What Hamas and Islamic Jihad are doing, even if you feel they are justified, they're clearly not peaceful. So would you accept the argument that from the outside, people see that as violence, firing rockets and firing mortars on Israel as violence? So again, does that help or harm your cause because you're saying you want to peacefully protest against the Israeli occupation and the siege?
I'd like to ask the people outside, why they just see the Hamas and Jihad's rockets only, and they don't see the rockets of Israel, while they are like just training on the heads of our children and women and elderly people. If we are talking about the last 3 wars on Gaza Strip, we are talking about more than 4,000 Palestinian people have been killed. Let us just also inform you that in the Great Return March, more than 120 Palestinian people have also been killed on the borders, and none of the Israelis was killed. So the result of the Great Return March and even the flotilla toward the world was a peaceful event, and they just want to convey their message for the free world that we want to live and we will struggle for life.
Okay, so do you want both peaceful and violent resistance?
No, everyone in Palestine here and every Palestinian in Gaza Strip believe in peaceful resistance and peaceful events to gain back their rights.
But again, Ramadan, just for clarity, again, as I say, and I'm sorry to continue to repeat this, why is it so hard to say that that which Hamas and Jihad are doing doesn't help the situation? Because as you mentioned as well, the Israelis rain down bombs on the Gaza Strip and kill civilians. It makes it more difficult for you, doesn't it? Because you're protesting peacefully, but the leadership is firing rockets, and you know the response that it's going to get.
Unfortunately, we are in some kind of state of a revolution against Israeli occupation. So you might find people believe in violence against the occupation, and other people believe in a peaceful resistance against the occupation. And I'm the one who believe in peaceful resistance and events toward the occupation power here. It might be that the Palestinian factions some kind like interrupted these peaceful events, but this cannot. But no one can deny that these Palestinian factions, what are they doing? Is their right also to fight for struggle, to fight the occupation power according to the international conventions. A lot of international conventions support that the people of a state, whatever the state is to protect their state and to use resistance against the occupation power.
Okay, Ramadan Al-Hayek, unfortunately we're out of time. I would have loved to have continued. But I thank you very much for joining us on the Newsmakers. That's all for this edition of the Newsmakers with me, Imran Garda. You can check out more of our stories on YouTube, Facebook and Twitter. Remember to like, follow and subscribe. Next time, could Slovenia join its neighbors by picking a populist government opposed to refugees? Sunday's election could decide. Until then, thank you for watching. Bye-bye.